So let me welcome all of you. I'm Terry Kramer. I'm the faculty director of the Easton Technology Management Center here at UCLA Anderson. And I wanted to welcome you to this PM trifecta session, Product Management Essentials, Careers, and Curriculum Plans at Anderson. And we're very fortunate today that we have got three impressive product managers with us from Facebook, from Uber, and from Stripe, who are going to describe the all-important role of product management, careers, and key success factors. Now, all of you know we live in a world today where there are huge opportunities and challenges in almost every sector that we see. And technology offers significant benefits in a variety of areas: deeper customer engagement, new products, new services, and overall benefits to companies, to individuals as consumers, and to society more broadly. And whether you look at large tech giants like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, or whether you look at small startup ventures, many of these organizations are heavily technology-based and highly product-oriented in how they run their businesses. And these opportunities in technology-based innovation show up in a variety of forms today: autonomous vehicles, diagnostic tools, recommendation engines in healthcare and in media, accelerated e-commerce offerings, and virtual assistants. So all of this leads to how critical the product manager role is in ensuring products and services meet the needs of customers and meet the needs of businesses. A couple of interesting stats here at UCLA Anderson. The product management role is the second most popular job function post-MBA. In 2020 at Anderson, we graduated the third highest percentage of students going into tech of any of the top business schools in the US. And to support this whole interest that we see in product management from our students, we are going to be offering a winter quarter class focused on product discovery, and we have plans to offer a second course focused on product delivery that'll be in the spring term. We're very fortunate to have with us the instructor for our product discovery class, Matt, and then our two instructors slated to be our instructor for product delivery, both Ying and Arun. Let me now tell you about each of them. First of all, Ying is a senior product manager in the Uber marketplace. She helps deliver driver improvement opportunities that help drive earnings enhancement for them while balancing growth in the marketplace. Prior to Uber, she was at Amazon Music's machine learning unit that helped 80 million customers discover the content that they love. She also built the flagship product line of a voice AI startup's international business from literally nothing to 50% of company revenues. She holds an MBA from Harvard Business School, a bachelor's in physics from Shanghai Jiao Tong University in China, and she holds a master's in industrial engineering from École des Mines de Paris in France. Next on to Arun. So Arun is a senior product manager at Facebook's Core ML team. He helps build AI and machine learning systems that serve 2.7 billion users. His work implementing recommenders while managing cross-functional teams has generated 70% of Facebook's revenue growth in the last 5 years. Prior to Facebook, he worked at Amazon's Music ML group with Ying, building a personalization and machine learning system for their 80 million users. Arun was also a co-founder and CEO of Starbutter AI, which developed a virtual assistant that helped consumers pick financial products like credit cards, mortgages, and insurance. He holds an MBA from UCLA Anderson, received a bachelor's in classics and quantitative finance from the University of Pennsylvania. Our plans, as I mentioned, is for Ying and Arun to teach the new product delivery course for tech-based businesses again in the spring term. Let me now introduce Matt. Matt Conroy is a product lead for Europe, Middle East, Africa at Stripe. Stripe, as you know, provides a payments processing infrastructure for the internet. Matt leads a team of PMs working on the growth of the platform. Prior to Stripe, he spent over 10 years as a product manager at Google, driving vision, strategy, and execution for the global teams responsible for a variety of Google's businesses, including AdSense, Google Payments, and Google Fit. He holds a bachelor's in economics from Harvard and a master's in economics from Oxford. Matt will be teaching our product discovery course for tech-based companies in the winter term. Now, for today's session, I'm going to ask the panelists a series of questions to get a better sense of their views on a variety of issues. And then we're going to use Slido for a moderated Q&A. So you just go to Slido, Slido.com. The event code is PMT21. So product management trifecta, PMT21. So Matt, Ying, and Arun, let me welcome you guys in every respect. Welcome you to this webinar that we're having, and welcome you to Anderson and classes you'll be teaching. I want to drill down on three areas during our discussion. One is I want to better understand your backgrounds and how they've tied to the jobs that you have. Second thing I want to talk about is product management careers. What are the skill requirements? How are product management roles changing as time progresses, et cetera? And then the third area I want to talk about is the product management curriculum for tech-based companies at Anderson, and specifically talk about your courses so our attendees will know a little bit more about that. So let me start out, and I want to have each of you tell me a little bit more about your background, things that I didn't already share, and how they've tied into your career. Matt, let me start out with you.
Yeah, sure. And thanks very much for having the three of us. We're delighted to be with such a big group. I can see the little counter on the bottom of the screen. So things you didn't mention, I actually began my career sort of split mostly in the public sector with a little bit of consulting thrown in there, which will certainly be recognizable to quite a few of the MBA students in here. And actually, as part of my career in the public sector, I worked on a book at the OECD entitled Future Global Shocks. And I'll be honest with you, we had a chapter in there about preventing pandemics. So I'm sorry to say that book had very little impact, it seemed, on what came forward. So I apologize for that. But I think one of the things that you'll hear from myself and Ying and Arun today is that there are multiple successful paths to PM. And the three of us have all had, different experiences at quite a few different companies. And, for at least a couple of us here, multiple different career paths on the way to big tech. And so, we're really excited to share that with the group today as well.
Excellent. One follow-on question, Matt. You've got a heavy background in economics. How does that fit in product management? Is it an advantage, disadvantage, et cetera?
I think part of being a successful PM is unlocking the talent of all of the experts with whom you work, right? And in the course we will have in the winter, we talk a lot about the DNA of a really successful product team, which is inclusive of not just the technical contributors, but marketing, sales, legal, design, and many more functions in there. And so I actually think a grounding in multiple disciplines, whether they be academic or professional and where that experience comes from, actually gives you a lot of empathy for your colleagues. It also arms you with the vocabulary to storytell and communicate with them and gain alignment on that front. And I think just makes you a little bit more of an effective collaborator. So I don't think it's held me back. If anything, it's been one of the lenses that I bring to my work.
Excellent, excellent. Ying, let me go to you. Similar question. Tell us about some of the things that I didn't announce up front that kind of helped explain your success.
Sure. So I guess one thing that I could mention here is I actually started in a completely different industry. So I started in oil and gas. I worked as a process engineer for 4 years before switching actually to consumer electronics for a short stint of 2 years, working in the BD function, and until I joined the startup that you earlier on mentioned that does a voice AI product, and I would say the product is also a hardware software combined product. So the smart, like a smartwatch is what I worked on. So I think that's something that is not very typical in, I guess, today's product development, product management track. I think, similar to Matt's point, I think the background of Wanderer actually helps you bring the a different. I think it. Well, in a product innovation, in an innovation environment, actually different point of view and different angles are always important. And I think, having a diverse background actually helps that rather than hindering.
Excellent. Very helpful, Ying. And similar question, Arun, to you.
Yeah, so my background also was not initially in tech per se. I worked in finance for family offices, investing large amounts of capital, and then also on a quantitative trading desk where we invested in very complicated derivatives and other securities. So my jump really into product and going into tech only really came from seeing AI taking off around 2012 with some pretty big advances in terms of AlexNet and ImageNet, and deciding that I thought all those applications for AI would be a lot more interesting in general consumer enterprise software versus in finance. So love product management, have a lot of interesting things I'd like to discuss here, but for any AI specific questions, I would love to take those too.
Good. And Arun, let me just drill down. You've got an interesting background in entrepreneurship. Kind of each of you have got something unique about your background. You've got entrepreneurship. How did that help you going into larger tech? And then any advice you've got for the attendees here that are thinking about tech-based entrepreneurship?
Sure. A couple of thoughts. The first is, if your tech career is a long one, I think it's excellent to spend it in many different sized companies, so small, medium, and large, because each operates in its own way and has a fundamentally different experience where you can learn different things. My experience going from starting a tech startup, raising venture money, kind of taking it up to a point, and then having to shut it down later was defining in the sense that from a startup perspective, you do everything from actually writing the initial code to the marketing, to the sales, to the legal, all the functions that Matthew mentioned, you have a team of 3 to 5 people do, which is crazy. Compared to in a large company where as a PM, you're really mediating and trying to bring the best out of those teams. And you have experts that know a lot more than you in any area, and you as the PM are trying to get whatever that central ground is of the most useful value. Mm-hmm. So as you think of your career, it's a very different experience, obviously, depending on the size of the company you work on. But I would encourage people to think about, at least at some point, doing all 3.
Good. Arun, one follow-on question for you. The work that Stephen Blank at Stanford does about I'm summarizing a lot of it, but you're either a big company person or you're a startup person. You usually don't transcend the two. Do you buy that much or not really?
I think certain people choose to specialize in niches, and that's fine. But I do think you're going to have the most interesting career and potentially add the most value if you can go back and forth. And certainly in the large companies I've been at, I've seen plenty of startup founders and entrepreneurs come and take PM roles. And I constantly see people in large companies leave to go work at startups for different reasons. So I think the norm is actually for people to go back and forth and not just to stick to one versus the other.
Excellent. Very helpful. Matt, let me go to one question for you, and then we're going to talk more about PM careers. But you started in consulting and then went into tech. Tell us about that transition, the goods and the bads of starting out in consulting.
Sure. Yeah. And I would just, before I do that, I would just second Arun's penchant for switching. And I would say that even on the startup to big tech spectrum, there's a lot of exciting space in the middle as well. Companies that are in accelerated growth phases or turnaround phases. And, I would see that as a huge spectrum of which, gaining experience across multiple points is really good. So as Professor Kramer mentioned, I did start in consulting, and I think, as many of the listeners will know, consulting has a lot of good advantages in terms of rapid exposure to multiple industries, and this requirement of folks working in consulting for a rapid spin up, right, to some degree of expertise, while combining some useful, repeatable frameworks or processes, to bring value in some sort of like time delimited engagement. Mm-hmm. I think there are some useful takeaways in that kind of, let's say, project-based work, and that can you, take what a skill set around running design sprints or around, assessing usability risk or business viability risk, and bringing that to self-driving cars or ads or, working on YouTube. So I think there are some really good corollaries there. However, lives are short and careers are long. I think, you're going to be able to bring expertise from, a lot of different places about how to get things done. I mean, a lot of product management is being able to, again, harness the expertise of people around you and move sort of systems at companies of varying sizes toward a common goal, right? Which is, I think, one of the reasons why we're so excited about sort of an evolving curriculum around product management at Anderson is sort of, PM is the new GM, right? It taxes a lot of those same muscles in getting things done. So I think it was a useful starting point for me. But the reason I'm still in tech today is because I think it sort of gives you the highest leverage for impact, and I think is attracting some of the most ambitious and talented folks who are being attracted to, companies of all different sizes to make an impact in technology. That's really what sort of keeps me here.
Excellent. Great. Ying, let me now shift into a deeper discussion about PM careers and the job itself. So tell us, the best and the worst of being a PM. And I know it may change based on the person you ask, but give us your sense of best and worst.
That's a great question. So the best part of being a PM, I think first I want to second what Matt just said, that, we all, three of us all did a little bit of wondering before getting into tech, and the reason why, and to answer, hey, why do I need to be in tech is an important one. And I think obviously one of the best part I found in being a PM, to Matt's point of view, I also found that this is a great way in today to make impact. And for me, especially, is how tech can make ordinary people's lives a little bit better. And that sort of motivated me to go into tech today and stay in tech, and especially on the consumer tech side. So other things, I think, so aside from impact, I love the closeness we are to creation. I think that's another luxury of being a PM. You are on the creating team, working with either figuring it out yourself, as Arun mentioned, in a startup environment, which I also was fortunate to get a sense of. It is truly about learning fast and figuring out yourself, or leveraging and working with experts you respect and trust to build it. But you are part of the creation team, and what's even better is that often you are probably, we talk about in an environment where there's a PM driving culture for innovate or for path forward. You actually have the luxury to be the sort of like sitting at the steering section and being able to direct the ship to an unknown direction. I think those are the great parts I enjoy being a PM. The worst of being a PM, I don't know. This will be I guess personal. I guess for some people, what's good would be for some others that are bad. I often find people who struggle to fit into this role, as I talk to people, who go through it, is probably you need to be very comfortable being the least knowledgeable of all, right? This is the flip coin of the coin flip side of being able to work with a team and in the crossroads of these different expertise. You are constantly probably the least expert among them, and you need to be comfortable and stay functional. And also, I think I also want to mention what Arun said earlier on about, hey, you're either a big company person or a small company person. I feel like regardless, right? It's about gathering resource and do the things you want to do. Like being an entrepreneur in a big company or a small company environment, it's fundamentally the same thing. And what does that mean for a PM? It's a PM as an entrepreneur with an entrepreneur mindset. You have to be patient, working through different interests and build alliance where I guess your team of experts sort of are probably not so interested in doing so and probably don't have the patience of doing so, and rely on you to help the team gather the necessary resource and navigate it through. Big company or small company wise, it's a complex environment and I guess relatively narrow opportunity window of success, and you're responsible for navigating through that. Some people may not find that to be to be particularly enjoyable.
Excellent. Very, very helpful. Arun, let me go to you to better understand the types of product management roles. So first of all, we talked about product management and looking at each of your backgrounds in different companies, Stripe versus Google, Facebook, Uber, et cetera. Also, some of the product management roles seem to be directly product facing versus internally supporting another team. And if I understood some of the Amazon Music role, it had a little more of that complexion. Can you give us the landscape about the different types of PM roles and again, the goods and bads on each?
Yeah, so for a long time, you had PM generalists that would jump back and forth between many types of roles. So you could jump from hardware to software, you could jump from consumer to enterprise, and so on. I think one trend we've seen more recently is you've seen people start to specialize more within segments of tech, and you've seen even specialist roles, things like machine learning specialists, hardware specialists, and so on develop. So to answer one of the questions that's come up, depending on whether you're going to be in a more generalist role, you might just need to have a broad set of skills for, visioning a product, working with engineers, marketing, sales, legal, and so on. Those are kind of some of the more generic skills. But if you're working in a highly technical product, something that requires, let's say detailed hardware knowledge of how data centers work, or something where you're providing an API to a very narrow group of people, you're going to have to have more specialized knowledge of how those fields work. So what we're seeing is this trend of often people coming in generalist roles, but over time, at least doing some tours in specialized areas where they've developed knowledge and where there's need. And often people come in when it's early, when a specialized area is being developed, and grow with it, and that's how they become a specialist. But we're seeing this back and forth between generalists who can tie many groups together or work in a kind of a more generic product versus specialists who go narrow and deep.
Okay, and is the generalist to specialist, you talked about it based on the complexity, the technical complexity of the product, does it also operate on a dimension of kind of internal product manager versus external product manager?
Yep. So that's one of the dimensions. With larger companies, you can have entire product teams working on building infrastructure and platform internals that support teams that actually create external facing software or hardware. So an example would be like an internal API that gets data from 100 points and available to another 100 points across the company. And you see PM specialize in those roles, and those are very hard and difficult to do. On the other hand, you could be purely external facing, let's say work at a consumer app or enterprise app, where you might be working a lot with the design and where to put the buttons and how the app flow should be. So that's another area where people can specialize than being, let's say, more design oriented or more platform oriented on the inside.
Yep. Okay. So without getting overly analytic, it's a 2x2 matrix. based on being internal versus not, technical product versus less technical? Is that kind of the dimensions of product management?
I would say that those are at least two. I think you could do software versus hardware and consumer versus enterprise as two other dimensions too. Okay. So maybe put that in a 4D matrix, or you'd have two 2D matrices.
My head's blowing up. Okay.
I think you could probably add life cycle stage to that as well. I think, we certainly, all three of us work with PMs who might gravitate toward a more 0 to 1 environment. Yep. And other PMs might, gravitate toward how do I scale something from, the early beginnings of product market fit, into, hey, a much bigger business, or something, that takes on a life of its own. So I think it'll be hard to put product management into a 2x2 matrix, in part because of the greater diversity in the role over time that Arun described. I think, that certainly resonates with me.
Good. So Matt, can you give us an easy one-liner, depending on how many dimensions? It's a multivariate equation here. But if you were to kind of pick out several of the key differences in dimensions, like internal versus external, are there certain traits that people need to have to kind of do well? Like if you're going to be an internal product manager, I assume you got to navigate the organization. It may be a little more thankless. You're one level removed from the revenue, blah, blah, blah. And you better have a thicker skin. You better love the technical complexity to outweigh not seeing the customer thing as directly, whatever. I'm making all this up. Can you give us a one-liner on some of these differences?
Well, I can try. I mean, I think it's a really interesting question, and would certainly, vary with experience. Even as an internal product manager, if someone were taking on that role, one of the first things that I would advise that person to do is forget that for a second and go figure out who their users are, go figure out who their customers are. Mm-hmm. And, the simple fact that, their users or their customers wears the same badge and, parks their Prius in the same driveway, doesn't really change the necessary next step, which is to, have a deep empathy for that user, start understanding what their problems are, what their real needs are, and start brainstorming some potential solutions, technical or otherwise, about how to meet those needs. Mm-hmm. So that being said, one of the things that, I have certainly seen for folks who have an internally facing product management role is, boy, you have some pretty demanding users. And actually, you probably have some pretty demanding users who are downright knowledgeable about what they need as well. Because, if you're working on, productivity tools or infrastructure, as Arun mentioned, those folks who live and breathe that as part of their day-to-day work are going to have some strong opinions about what's wrong and what you need to build. So, I think you need to take that on board. I think, working on I'm not saying that if you're working on a consumer app that you would necessarily have a different experience. I think rightly so, users have, an intuition, whether it's easily expressible or not, about what their problems are and where they need help, even if they can't jump all the way to give you the solution. I think that's where you really see a lot of the added value of what a product manager can bring is in that translation process. Yep. So I think, that's kind of how I would see an internal role there being a bit different. But I would encourage anyone who's starting out in a PM career to actually try and expose yourself, whether in individual projects or whether in longer term engagements, to as many different flavors of the PM role as possible, because it'll help you understand which types of the role, which flavors of the role you gravitate to. And if you find the ones that you gravitate to, you're going to be more successful. You're going to enjoy your work more.
Good. One follow-on question on that, Matt, is there, if people kind of thinking about their careers and advancing their careers, is there a hierarchy inside a lot of tech companies about what is viewed as kind of the most important environment to be a product manager versus not? External, internal, life cycle, all of that stuff. Is there a hierarchy so people can be saying, I need to be shooting in this direction?
That's a really good question. And, I'd be curious about my illustrious colleagues and their opinion on this too. Let me speak from the perspective of a hiring manager, which is like at least an authentic place I can come from here. To me, the answer is no, right? What I would want to see is impact and demonstrated impact and the manner in which that impact was achieved, right? How one conducts themselves as a collaborator and as an executor, and as a sort of technical leader. And to me, there are lots of different surface areas, businesses, consumer, enterprise. There's so many different places in which meaningful impact can be made. That for me, I'm in making a hiring decision, I'm going to jump to one level deeper and try to understand, what that impact was in the environment, that it was made and how that impact was achieved. And that's going to be a bit more important to me than, whether it was an internal or external role. The one caveat to that, though, is I think comes back to Arun's point about an overall trend towards specialization as the product management role has become, bigger and more well-defined at so many different companies. I think there are cases where you may be looking for specific skill sets, right? In say designing great APIs as an example versus designing great user experiences. Have a deep understanding of enterprise software as a service versus say, driving engagement on a platform. There are flavors of experience that are going to probably prepare you better or worse for other jobs or other kinds of projects you want to take on. Mm-hmm. But I would still bring it back to that first comment, which is, I'm looking for someone who's demonstrated the toolkit, demonstrated the skill set, and has a sort of a demonstrable evidence of impact.
Excellent. Excellent. Ying, let me go to you related to that. And if I kind of remember your background appropriately, you were kind of internal product management at Amazon Music, where you're developing this machine learning recommendation engine, et cetera. And then Uber is more external facing with drivers and the like. Tell us about your experience about kind of the internal versus external. What was the best? What was the worst? How do you think about metrics in each of these things, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Matt already hit quite a few spot on exactly what the internal facing PM's challenge is. So I would say, so just a background in Amazon, I actually worked with a data platform team, which is purely internal facing. Then working with the machine learning team, I was able to closely partner with an experienced team. So we worked together with another PM on the Amazon Music's homepage. So it's a little bit moving towards the external facing customer experience thinking. I would say the challenge for the internal facing PM, right? So to Matt's point, your customers are actually very close to you, very knowledgeable about what you're doing, and very vocal. Although people think, hey, like internally you're at the best managing hundreds and thousands of customers versus when you're direct customer facing, you're managing millions and billions of customers. But when those customers have a voice, sit in front of you, and very knowledgeable, it's actually hard. Well, if I may say, in terms of stakeholder management, it's actually harder to manage, almost harder to manage than a silent millions and billions of customers who may tell you something about them by a number or some random interviews. So what I found, so I actually have found two things very important functioning as an internal customer. The first thing is taking a analogy of so somebody seeing somebody building a primitive structure and get asked, what are you building? And you're able to answer, hey, I'm building a cathedral that's going to last 100 years. So do not think about your customers just internal, right? Understand what they are building and what you're enabling them to build actually is super important. So understand your customer all the way to the customer they serve as an internal customer. That's very important. Why is that important? Because the second key aspect of being an internal product manager is you need to be able to ruthlessly prioritize in front of all these very knowledgeable and opinionated customers. And how do you do that? Is actually having the same North Star as them. And, like often you're building a platform that's enabling, I don't know, 50 experienced teams to be able to do their jobs and to be able to understand and communicate, hey, whose jobs are currently most impactful to our customers. And therefore, we have to, prioritize their needs first. Having a tiering structure and being able to communicate that is actually important to the success of an internal PM, I would say.
Good. One follow-up question, Ying. I'll put you on the spot on this. So if our students in the audience are trying to decide against all these elements of the multivariate equation, they have to decide on company, they have to decide on product, they have to decide internal versus external, they have to decide on life cycle. If you were to give us your rank ordered list of how a prospective product manager, one of our students, should be making decisions. Again, thinking about, should they make it based on the company primarily, the product, internal, external, life cycle, blah, 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 the boss. How would your hierarchy of criteria look?
Wow, that's a great question. And a highly personal one, I think.
Yes.
Let me think through this. I think I would prioritize it, like in terms of making decision right now, right? Like if I were an MBA student, thinking about my next step, probably having a career that was not in the PM field, and therefore an extension of it would be natural. I would first prioritize the opportunity to be a PM. So the advice is, hey, get exposure. To Matt's earlier point, there are a lot of, despite the general trend of specializing, there are a lot of skills that are I don't know what's the right word, but like transferable skills between the internal facing PM, external facing PM, etc. So getting any PM experience as an exposure would be a great first step. And actually, fully transparency, that's probably why I decided, when I decided to jump into software product management, I took on the internal data platform PM role, knowing that it probably is not where my heart sits. Mm-hmm. And the next criteria I would look at is where my heart sits. It's in terms of, why do I need to be in tech? What kind of problem? Because PMs are fundamentally problem solvers. So what kind of problems attract you? Like, will make you think about it every day, and you don't get tired of it. To Arun and Matt's earlier point about PM being specialized, right? Like thinking about this trend in terms of, hey, how do I set myself on the path that I'm happy to walk on for the next 5 to 10 years? The third criteria I would think about actually is in terms of, along this line of, this is a more and more specialized field. Are there frontiers that will unlock the next, basically, in terms of PM making an impact? Where would the biggest potential of impact come from? What kind of technologies does it tie into? I think a few years ago, that probably 10 years ago, that would be mobile. And then they moved to probably, voice was a very interesting field. Machine learning becomes very interesting. Those areas become quote unquote hot because that's a belief that technology and related product is going to unlock the next wave of potential in terms of productivity gain, cost cutting, whatnot. Mm-hmm. So having your own judgment in where this industry is going, I think is important, and I would prioritize getting into the right field. Unless it's something that you completely are not interested. But I think we live in the world where a lot of interesting things are happening in different tracks, and I think finding the sort of a sweet spot between the second and third would be feasible.
Excellent. Excellent. Arun, let me go to you with the same question. So Ying has basically said product management, get that experience is number one. Number two is the heart, where your heart is on types of problems you're solving. And then the third is looking at where the frontiers are. How do you look at the criteria across all of it? And if you could overlay your interesting background, I think you worked at PIMCO originally. You've worked at Facebook, you've worked at Amazon, you've done startups. Overlay all of that, given the breadth of companies you've worked for.
So I really like Ying's phrasing, like getting the PM experience and going to the problems you care about the most. I think that's a really good starting point, and thinking about the trends of where tech is going and specific areas that you might have technical insight about. On top of that, I would say like the refinements, it's really just refinements in what Ying said. Finding good teams. Like when it comes down to it, ultimately it's about small teams building things. And do you really like the team that you're looking at, that you're going to be working closely with? And then connecting it to your past, right? You might have some knowledge from your past. Maybe you were a consultant, maybe you worked in finance. And is there a natural bridge where, because of that past knowledge, you could add more value to a team right off the get-go? Mm-hmm. So, if you're in finance, maybe the easiest jump is into fintech. If you're working in consumer products marketing, maybe the jump is into a consumer product startup of some sort. So just thinking about what that linear narrative is in your career, where you can build off of existing skill sets and not have to start from scratch, is something else I recommend students think about.
Perfect. Very helpful. I'm going to do one last question on jobs. Then I want to get into the classes, and then we're going to take the audience questions. Matt, you were talking about interviewing candidates. So I'm trying to think about all these different, capabilities, different roles you can go into, backgrounds you can have, blah, blah, blah. How does somebody effectively interview to get the job without running the risk that you're viewed as a master of nothing, that you're just kind of good at a lot of different things and the company needs a lot of different things and it all feels a bit chaotic? How do you kind of sell yourself against this diverse environment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think a good starting place is to have enough humility to know that you are a master of nothing. That's not a bad place to start, to be honest. I think, the PM as servant model still works with me, right? Especially with, folks early in their career is, your responsibility is to do whatever it takes, right? To make your product, your team, and your company successful. And, I think that old adage that, that means, getting into the weeds and clearing the roadblocks and doing everything in between is still important. From a skill perspective, I'm really looking for someone who has great judgment, right? Because I think, we make a lot of 51-49 decisions in our line of work, many of which are reversible, right? And so I think, having good judgment and knowing, when is the right time to make a decision and then making as many good decisions as you can, I think is item number one. I think having that empathy is super important. And, tech companies have refined many ways, all of them imperfect, but to look for that empathy and test for that empathy. And then I think, we really want to see someone who's a great storyteller, someone who's a great communicator. And I don't mean spinning a yarn, right? But, a lot of what makes, PMs really successful is be able to, constantly communicate up, down, and around, right? To who they're working for and who they're working with, and who they're working on behalf of. Here's what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how's it going, right? And I think that, becomes a lot of the bread and butter of what it's like, in the day to day. And then finally, you're looking for that kind of, emergent leadership, the ability that not just a safe pair of hands, but, someone who, you can invest in. And, there's always going to be much more that you want to do as a company and as a team than you will have the resources to do it. And so these are bets, right? And as a company and as a hiring manager, you want to make, bets on the right people. So good. That's a little bit about the approach. I think when you're, actually trying to describe to a hiring manager, where you're coming from and why you want this job, I think it's important to show a genuine motivation for the work that the company is doing. I think it's worth pointing that out. I think you should show an appreciation for the craft. And I think you do that by talking about the experiences you've had and where you've demonstrated those skills in the past.
Yep. And is it too much of an overreach to say that tech companies on average are much more evangelical about their products than other non-tech? And if you aren't evangelical about that product, you run the risk, certainly in an interview, of tissue rejection.
I would imagine that there are companies who do feel that way. I think to points both Ying and Arun made, there are everyone sort of has a different stack rank in how they judge the attractiveness of different roles. Could be the surface area, could be the life cycle stage, could be the team, the leader, or any combination of those. And I do think it is important as a hiring manager to recognize that your stack rank as a hiring manager may not be the same stack rank as the person you're speaking to, and that is okay. Which is to say that they might not be as evangelically or committed or as passionate about the surface area as you, but that does not mean that you should automatically reject them out of hand, right? I think over time, if nothing else, what all of us should have gotten a greater feeling for is that there are multiple paths to PM and multiple archetypes of PMs, folks who spike on different skill sets and bring different things to the table. And for me, at least, while I want to see a passion for joining the company and for wanting this role, I think it's okay if that passion for the surface area doesn't follow to quite the same degree.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Arun, let me give you a 30-second opportunity. Anything you'd want to add to that, and then I want to get into the classes.
For PM hiring in particular, recruiting?
Advice on interviewing, recruiting, et cetera.
Yeah, I think the one thing that people don't talk about is a lot of it is it's just about getting your foot in the door. So getting that internship experience, the hands-on experience of doing PM, especially if you're a transition student. And once you have that, you'll have a better sense of how things work. Beyond that, it's just practice, right? Like there's a bunch of things a lot of the companies test on, things like product sense and execution and so on. Just understanding what frameworks are common and being able to practice and kind of get past at least the earlier levels of the PM interviews. Mm-hmm. And then when you get to the higher levels, you deal with the things that Matt talks about, which is the more subtle areas of judgment and how much you fit with the team and so on.
Good. Perfect. So let me shift in the last area, and then we're going to do audience questions on the curriculum itself. So plans are winter term. Matt, you're going to be teaching a product management discovery class. And I'm going to ask you in a second to just give us the Reader's Digest summary of what that course covers. If you know what time of day, one of the questions that's come in, is this open to our exec MBAs, FEMBAs, MBAs? And that generally is driven by time of day the class is offered. Is it offered in the evening or not? But if you could do that, and then Arun and Ying, you're going to be teaching the product management delivery class. And if you can, again, explain the curriculum, the difference with the first one, et cetera, when you're going to be offering it. And if you would, both of you guys, all of you guys, explain the unique focus on tech-based companies and why we've kind of created these just for tech. So Matt, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So I got to be honest with you. We are going to start bright and early after the new year. We're the first half of the winter quarter. We're going to be at Mondays, 7:10 p.m. to 10 p.m. So we've got a late slot, but it does mean that those of you who are working during the middle of the day, this time should still work. As Professor Kramer mentioned, our focus is going to be on discovery, and Arun and Ying are going to focus a little bit more on delivery. So here, what we're talking about here is answering that age-old question of what do we build next, right? And that's what we're going to do. And as a little bit of a segue from what Arun described, we're looking for builders as hiring managers. So we're going to spend a lot of time actually practicing, how you take, user needs and translate them into something buildable and launchable. And that's really what we're going to do. And we're also going to dissect what makes PMs, teams, and products successful in a market, and explore the different facets of a product team and how they work, often in large technology companies, since that's a big focus for the group. And then I would say just the final thing is we are going to put it all together and do some building. And what we're really hoping is that for a lot of folks, this provides them part of that asset, part of that useful set of assets that they can bring out into the marketplace.
Excellent. Very helpful. And then Arun and Ying, your description of your class?
So with the delivery class, we think of it as being the next step. So think of Matt's class as the 0 to 1. You're taking pure pain points and getting the first product up. Ours would be the 1 to 100 or the 100 to 1,000. If you have an existing product or suite of products, what new product do you add? How do you take the existing ones and iterate and refine on them to keep meeting user needs? A lot of it is about scaling. A lot of it is about launching. We're also going to deal a lot with working in large organizations and cross-functional teams where you really might need legal or marketing or certain other areas on board to be able to launch these products. So delivery is very much, kind of the mid to late cycle stages of a product versus the earlier parts of discovery. Ying, would you add anything to that?
No, I think you summarized it well.
Good. And your collective views, should students take both of the classes, one of the classes? I shouldn't ask you which one they should take because I know what your answer is going to be selfishly, but give us your view about the importance of taking one or both. Anybody?
I'll jump in first and then hand it over. I think one of the things all three of us would like to get across is, whether you've had experience in an internship already, or working on your own project externally, or even just, testing the waters of product management, we feel pretty confident that you're going to be able to get something new, get something additive out of both classes. And we are working hard also to make sure that they hit some of the same notes, so you see some continuity in the curriculum, but also approach, two equally important aspects of what you might think of as, a full stack look at the product lifecycle.
Mm-hmm. Good. Any upgrades, Arun or Ying?
I would say if you're interested in PM, definitely take both and take Matt's class first. Because I think it's better to start with the early stages and the 0 to 1, and once you understand that, then go to the later ones.
Excellent. And then Ying, can I ask you to give us, as difficult as it may be, a 30-second summary of what's different about tech-based companies that's the basis of your class? Because these are designed for people who want to go into tech as opposed to kind of non-tech related stuff.
Absolutely. I think about, so first I would say product management, we talked about it as a transferable skill. So there are a lot of generalizable principles of managing a product, be it in a traditional non-tech company versus in a tech company. As a PM, you are responsible for, get the pain points, get the solutions out, and bring it to market successfully. However, I would say specifically for tech companies compared to the non-tech environment, three things I found to be very different. The first is I would say the technological insight. Since we're building a tech company, building a tech product, the insight that comes from just the technological trends, where we are, where this wave of innovation is going to bring us, what are the potentials that heavily influence your product strategy, and that's worth focusing and understanding. The second bit I would say is actually often when I work with a tech product, and especially software products, the short product release cycle means a much faster pace of innovation and trial and error. So actually working with a tech product, you and your partners are probably experiencing a very different dynamic compared to the traditional product development, where you and different functions are probably at arm's length and you're handing over each other's stuff. Here, you're all sitting down, constantly switching hats between an idea creator, executor, whatnot, to take it to success. So we are going to talk in Arun and the course Arun and I talk about in terms of iteration, a lot about how that working cross-functionally means, especially in the tech company environment. Mm-hmm. And I would say the third part, this is probably a controversial part, which is about the importance of managing a business case, especially at the beginning of the product. I found, I worked in consumer electronics, so that's probably a little bit closer to the traditional model. I found the business case discussion to be front and center in that environment because it's much more predictable. The market you're operating in, a lot more predictable. Therefore, it's possible to build that business case and derive a lot of strategies from it. Whereas in tech, I found for the tech product managers, often this discussion probably looks like, and it's an afterthought, and there is a lot of founders' ethos saying that, hey, we believe in a product because it makes sense to our customers, and we'll figure out the business case behind it at a later day. For better or worse, I think that's a big difference as well, where, like the way you move, like the argument, the center argument, you move people to go with you towards a certain direction it probably is not a business related one. It's a lot more customer centric one and technological trend centric one.
Excellent. Very good insights. So let me get, there's a whole bunch of questions here. We'll need to do these quickly because we got to wrap up soon here. But let me ask the first one. I'll just ask one of you to cover each of these. Amit and 16 other people asked the same question. With such varying backgrounds you have, how much in-depth knowledge of the product itself is important in your roles, especially again in the interviewing mode, and then when you get into the role? Arun, let me ask you that one.
Yeah, so I'd say you want to be choosy. So when you're interviewing, definitely do a lot of work on the product and even interview customers of their product, so you really understand the pain points and you're going in with knowledge. Once you join, you're going to be the world's expert on that product as soon as possible, within months, because you're going to spend all day long thinking about it, talking to users, talking to the engineers, talking to design. So again, if you're transitioning to a role, it's good to generally, have some sort of technical insights and maybe in some sort of prior experience. But the more research you do before the interviews, and certainly once you join, you're going to be the world's expert on it, is the way I would think about it.
Perfect. Very helpful. Ying, let me go to you on this one. Landing a product management role seems to be getting more competitive. What skills should we build and or highlight to get the role? And again, Matt has already kind of shared a variety of things. PM as servant, empathy, storytelling, that organic leadership skill, et cetera. Additions on that one about what candidates should be highlighting?
So I would highlight two things. One is you're able to, to the point of PMs are builders. You're able to pull something off the ground, be it setting up a project, be it taking up an initiative. You're able to take whatever it needs to make it, cross the line where you intend to be. So highlighting you as a builder. And the second, again, to Matt's earlier point about effective communication and effective cross-organizational consensus. Well, yeah, so basically being an organizational worker is actually more and more important in a complex environment where that is product-led in tech companies.
Okay, excellent. Next question, for those without technical background and work experience, how would you recommend developing enough technical competency to be credible as a PM? Matt, let me go to you on that.
Yeah, sure. And I imagine this is close to a few folks' hearts here. I think 10 years ago, this idea of PMs needing a computer science background was something you felt in the industry and was something that companies held a bar on. I think increasingly, as we've seen, greater specialization and an appreciation for, candidates who spike on different skill sets, I think now that's evolved to, do you have technical interest? Do you have technical literacy? And, do you have good technical judgment? Can you work effectively, with engineers on technical decisions that need to be made? So I think, a couple of things I would call out there. One is highlight the times when, you've done exactly that, right? When you've demonstrated, either that technical literacy or that technical decision-making power. And then, all three of us have hit it at this point, show that you're a builder, right? I think, more so than, finishing any course, if you've demonstrated that you can deliver on a technical project, that for me is going to check the box.
Perfect. Perfect. Couple last questions here. Arun, can you talk about some of the other roles versus product management? Product ops, maybe program management, product marketing. Just give us a quick summary of the other roles and how they compare.
Sure. So in terms of some roles that are peripheral to product management, you have what you call program management or project management, which is making sure that there's a very clear plan with deliverables, with people who know when what's due and take ownership. And a lot of that just typically managing a project through making sure the execution actually gets done. So the product manager gets to focus on the pain points and the overall strategy and vision and the product details, whereas the program managers or the project managers focus on actually project managing the thing forward. You've got the product marketing group, which focuses a lot on the launch and making sure that the go-to-market strategy makes a lot of sense. And then there's a whole number of infra and ops people you could have that are working on some of the underlying technical infrastructure that you need to be able to launch, to scale, and so on. That's a very quick overview.
Excellent. Last question, Ying, for you. For people that have a technical background, trying to get into product management, coding background, software engineering, et cetera, what would be their angle for ensuring a good outcome in interviewing and an ultimate PM role?
Wow, I think you first, if you have that background, you already got to get a massive leg up. Like to Matt's point, you are able to demonstrate your understanding about the product you're interviewing for at a technical depth, and also because you probably gained that background from being a member of, I guess either learning coding or being a member that was probably the engineering side, being able to show that, hey, I have great empathy for the role I'm about to take on the other side of the table, and therefore, I'm able to work with the core community of this creator group, which is the engineers. That's a massive advantage to hit, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, it's about I guess the traps that people with this profile could fall into is that they focus too much on the solution side without focusing on, hey, I'm here to solve a customer problem, and I'm able to demonstrate my passion for the problem and my understanding of the problem. Being a PM, after all, is to understand the problem space and leaving the solution space to the experts that you're working with.
Excellent. Excellent. So listen, let me do this. I always like to end with what the so what's were that I got out of your messages, and I'll give you guys a very brief minute to upgrade them if appropriate. So first of all, this whole idea that there are a range of product management roles, in generalists to specialists, internal to external, life cycle, et cetera, technical product versus less technical, that there's a range of environments and skills in all of this. And so don't think about product management as kind of one size fits all. That then is kind of related to the second point, that a variety of skills can and do work well in product management, as opposed to just saying, all technical or not technical, et cetera, that a range of skills is very much advantageous. And that led to Matt's point that PM is the new GM. And all of the things good and bad about general management, leveraging others, needing to be comfortable not knowing everything in a really deep manner, garnering resources, that if you love that, you're going to like the role. If you hate that, it's going to be a problem. But that would be the third piece. Fourth item is have a hierarchy in your mind for how you're going to make decisions on which PM type of roles and companies you want to talk to. Ying shared her hierarchy. Arun gave his upgrades to it. Whether any of it's right or wrong, but think about, the company, think about the types of problems you're going to be working on, think about the frontiers of the technology, what's coming up in the future, think about the teams that you're working with so that you're clear about how and why you're going to be making certain decisions. I think I'm on the fifth item, recruiting. There's a variety of things that you should be able to demonstrate when you're interviewing. PM as a servant, the ability to be empathetic, the ability to be a storyteller, the ability to do what leaders do is 1 + 1 = 3. Can you garner resources to create better outcomes? And to the reminder that I think Ying provided, be clear about how you might be perceived as what your strengths and weaknesses are, and don't shy away from your weakness. Cover the weakness. And that may be talking about problems versus solutions and technical versus non-technical. And final items, the courses being offered coming up. So the discovery class is what do we build next? That is the elevator pitch on that class. The delivery one is oriented around scaling, what to add and what to iterate. And again, that's going to be a spring class. These are both 2-unit classes and open to all students. Have I missed anything? Excellent. Well, let me. Good. You didn't dare to challenge me on any of that summary there. Listen, let me just say a big thank you, first of all, to Matt, Arun, and Ying to share your expertise with everybody here so it helps people on their recruiting and ultimately their leadership journey. A huge thank you. A huge thank you for helping us think and execute against enhancements on the curriculum. I think these are going to be huge additions to the school. And then let me just thank everybody that attended. We had a huge turnout, well over 300 people on this program, which says a lot about the level of interest and engagement here. And let me thank the Easton Center team, including Heather, who was sole piloting the program here and the webinar. So thank you guys to all of you, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys all on campus and remote coming up. Take care.